Good afternoon. This is David Unsworth, host of the Pan Am Post English podcast. Colombia's 2018 presidential election is just 5 months off, and market research firm Invamer has just released a comprehensive poll revealing how the leading candidates would fare in a potential first and second round matchup. This year's crop of candidates features a crowded field across the political spectrum. Under Colombian law, if no candidate wins majority in the May 1st round election, the top two contenders will face off in an expected second round election in June. That is looking very likely at this point. Recent news has given a boost to Medellin Mayor Sergio Fajardo, who will now lead a center-left coalition that includes the support of Claudia Lopez and Jorge Robledo. Meanwhile, Ivan Duque won the nomination of the Centro Democratico party this weekend, the party of former President Alvaro Uribe, and will face off against former Defense Minister Marta Lucia Ramirez to lead a center-right coalition. Where is Colombia headed as a nation? What are the most serious problems facing the country? And what are the most important takeaways from this week's polling? The flavor of the month, it appears, is Sergio Fajardo. Sergio Fajardo is a pretty interesting fellow. He's widely viewed as a centrist. He's pretty popular with the press. He's pretty popular, actually, across the political spectrum. And he's generally viewed as not beholden to traditional political parties. He is a mathematician by training and education. He has a PhD in mathematics from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Now, it appeared to many of us, political commentators and so forth, that Claudia Lopez was kind of generating the buzz on the left. She had, quite a few things that went viral on social media, and she was positioning herself as the big anti-Santos candidate from the left, the crusader against corruption. Clearly, her star has fallen, and we found out this weekend as well. She not only is she not going to be running for president now, she'll be backing Fajardo, but she is not even going to be running for her Senate seat again in the upcoming term. She's going to be supporting her compañero sentimental, as we say in Spanish, her partner, who is going to be running for a Senate seat. Fajardo is very well positioned at this point. I don't know how likely it is he will actually end up being president. I think it's quite likely he could reach a second round, which is the most important thing of all, as these various candidates are jockeying for position. So this is a very comprehensive survey. It's been done twice before this year, in May, September, and now in December, as the year is coming to an end. It polled all across the country. Colombia is almost 50 million people, and traditionally you have kind of a stark division between the coastal regions, which are very heavily populated as well, and the altiplano, or the mountainous regions in the middle of the country, where cities such as Cali, Medellin, and Bogota are. So this was a survey taken in 19 capital cities of Colombia. Colombia has 32 states, or departamentos as they're called in Spanish, and in 38 municipalities that were not capital cities. The most important takeaway here, with Fajardo kind of consolidating his support on the left, he does very well in all geographic regions. He does well on the Caribbean coast. He does well in the coffee zone, as we call it, where Pereira and Manizales and Armenia are. He does well in the southwest, Cauca and Nariño. He does well in Bogota. And he does well across all socioeconomic divisions. We call them here in Colombia estratos. So we in Colombia have from estrato 1 to estrato 6. So Fajardo is looking quite popular here. And it's not just on the left, even though he's being backed by Claudia Lopez, who's on the left, and Jorge Robledo, who's quite far on the left. Sergio Fajardo is looking pretty good at this point. Now, on the right, we have this potential center-right coalition. I was in Bogota on Sunday to see Ivan Duque accept the nomination of the Centro Democratico party, that is Alvaro Uribe's party. What is going to happen now, supposedly, is that Marta Lucia Ramirez, former defense minister and presidential candidate as well, and Ivan Duque are going to face off and form a coalition. Well, both of them have said they're not interested in a vice presidential slot. That's exactly what you'd expect them to say. It's like in the United States when people running for the nomination say, no, I'm just running for president. I'm not going to be a vice president, etc. As it stands now, in this poll, 55% of potential participants in the center-right coalition back Ramirez and 29% back Duque. Now, the thing with Duque is that he's young and he's relatively unknown. He has served now 3 years in the Senate. He ran on a closed list, which basically means that his party put together a list of candidates and they could proportionally allocate seats in the Senate based on the share of votes that they got. So they got about a fifth of the votes last time around, and they got 20 senators. The question here is, with this center-right coalition, are Ramirez and Duque going to put together a combined ticket? And would Alvaro Uribe approve of, say, a Ramirez-Duque ticket? Marta Lucia Ramirez as the presidential nominee, Ivan Duque as the vice presidential nominee. Another major difference is that Ramirez isn't officially being backed by the Conservative Party. She's running as an independent, whereas Ivan Duque is, so he does have the sizable machinery of the Centro Democratico party with him. Another key factor here, though, is that Marta Lucia Ramirez has a lot of experience. She has very high levels of name recognition. She ran a very strong campaign in 2014. She got almost 2 million votes and finished a strong third. So she's well known, and she's like kind of a Fajardo. She's someone who could potentially pull support from across the political spectrum. Ramirez also fares relatively well with Partido de la U, which is Santos's party, with the Alianza Verde party, which is kind of a more centralist, environmentalist party, and the Partido Liberal. The really good news here for Fajardo, if you look across these polls, is that he fares extremely well in these second-round matchups. Fajardo beats every other candidate in a potential second-round matchup. So theoretically, if the election were held tomorrow, Fajardo would win in the first round, he'd head to a second round, and he'd beat everyone. Let's look at these numbers. He beats Gustavo Petro, former mayor of Bogota, former left-wing mayor of Bogota, 64% to 29%. He beats German Vargas Lleras, former vice president of Colombia, 62% to 30%. He beats Marta Lucia Ramirez 54% to 39%, and he beats Ivan Duque a whopping 73% to 20%. Now, like we've discussed, Duque is the least known of these candidates who could actually win the presidency. There was a very crowded field in the Centro Democratico party. It included other leading contenders like Carlos Olmes Trujillo, who's the former mayor of Cali, and Rafael Nieto, who is the former Vice Minister of Justice. I think we can expect to see Ivan Duque's numbers climb considerably and his name recognition. I think there's no doubt about that. Now, the poll, looking at these other candidates here, the poll had actually good news for Gustavo Petro. Gustavo Petro had a very, very tumultuous tenure as mayor of Bogota. He was actually briefly removed from office before a court ruling reinstated him. He, of all things, that was one of the most salient issues was his supervision of the trash pickups in Bogota. That was one of the main reasons that he was removed from office. He's climbed 4 points in this poll. In September, he was at around 10. Now he's at around 14. The worst news in this poll is really for German Vargas Lleras. In May of 2017, he was in first place. In September, he dropped to second place. Now he's at third place. German Vargas Lleras did just submit 5.5 million signatures to support his candidacy. He counts with the backing of the Cambio Radical party, and he's generally regarded to be kind of a center-right figure as well. But this poll is not good news for him. If this trend continues, it looks like he will not reach a second round. It looks, if I'm a betting man at this point, and obviously history will be my judge, but I think it looks very likely at this point that it will be Sergio Fajardo with a center-left coalition and some form of a Ramirez Duque ticket, the center-right coalition, heading to a second round. And that could set up a very, very close election, a very hotly contested election. What is going wrong here with German Vargas Lleras? Well, Colombians very consistently, by a 3-1 margin, are telling pollsters that the country is headed on the wrong track. German Vargas Lleras certainly, to some degree, is suffering from his association with the Santos administration. Santos is not popular right now. What's funny is that Santos is very popular outside of the country. He's popular with the international community for putting together this peace deal with the FARC. He is not popular in Colombia at this point. His approval ratings are underwater by around 30 points. Actually, more than that. Right now, 30%, just 30% of Colombians approve of the job Santos is doing, and 64% disapprove. So one has to think that even though German Vargas Lleras resigned a year ago to run for president, that this has got to be weighing on him to some degree. And what are the Colombian people saying that are the biggest problems right now? It's very interesting. In all three of these polls this year, the May poll, the September poll, the December poll, they cite three things. 20% of Colombians each cite these as the biggest problems: corruption, quality and coverage of healthcare, and unemployment. So it's not crime for them. It's not the implementation of the peace deal. These are the big three things that this leading crop of candidates here is going to address. Now, a very important question for the center-right in Colombia and for the Centro Democratic Party: how do Colombians view Uribe? They view him pretty favorably still by 2-1 margin. Uribe has 60% approval and just 34% disapproval. No other former president or current president has a net favorable rating, not even close. All of these former presidents, Gaviria, Samper, Pastrana, and of course Santos, are in fact very unfavorably rated. So, looking forward here to May and June, you have a very interesting phenomenon weighing over all of this, and that is the peace deal between the FARC and Santos that was, by a very narrow margin, rejected by the Colombian people in a referendum. Political commentators have said, well, it's like, we had the Trump election, we had Brexit, we had the Colombian rejection of the peace deal. It's kind of this anti-establishment, anti-elite phenomenon that seems to be sweeping the globe. And that would seem to lend credence to the suggestion that the center-right in Colombia is well positioned here. And that very well could be the case. However, according to these pollsters here, Colombians are not actually rating the peace deal as one of the most important issues right now. So, as we discussed before, it's an extremely crowded field right now, extremely crowded. This survey here actually deals with 14 candidates. Let's talk about a few of these other lesser-known candidates here. They are largely on the right and on the left. On the extreme left here, we have Piedad Cordoba and FARC head Rodrigo Londoño, who each clock in with 2%. On the right here, you have former Attorney General Alejandro Ordóñez, Juan Carlos Pinzón, who is currently the ambassador to the United States. They each get about 1%. And then you have Claudia Lopez, who also ran for president in 2014. She was briefly interim mayor of Bogota. She gets about 3%. So if these candidates all run, it's kind of a wash. It might help the center right a little bit because, if you add up here, Lopez, Londoño, Robledo, they get to about 7%, and these right-wing candidates are less than that, 3 or 4%. But really, I think here we have to see what happens with German Vargas Lleras. And also, it's not a good poll for German Vargas Lleras, that much is true. If we look here at these second-round matchups, it is not good for Vargas Lleras. Vargas Lleras loses by a huge margin to Fajardo. He loses 62% to 30%. If he's matched up against Gustavo Petro, he loses by a very, very narrow margin, 46% to 42%. And that is surprising because Gustavo Petro has extremely high negative ratings. He's not a popular figure, not in Bogota, not around the country, but it appears that Vargas Lleras is in danger here of not reaching the second round. Gustavo Petro is really a candidate who, at least in Bogota, his popularity is more with the Estrato 1, Estrato 2, that's to say the working class people in the south of Bogota and the west of Bogota. And he was not popular. I mean, he finished his mayorship with very low approval ratings. German Vargas Lleras loses as well to Humberto de la Calle, who is going to be the Liberal Party candidate. He was the top peace negotiator who put together the deal or headed the government side of the negotiations with the FARC. German Vargas Lleras loses 45% to 42% to Humberto de la Calle. And I think it's safe to say here, when 71% of Colombians are saying this month that the country is on the wrong track, or as we say in Spanish, the mal camino, and only 22% are saying we're on the right track, that cannot be good for a candidate like German Vargas Lleras. Just as in the United States, if a president leaves office with very low favorability ratings, his vice president is not going to be well positioned to be his successor. So, I mean, anything could happen. 5 months is an eternity in politics, but I think at this point, it's pretty safe to say that we are going to be looking at, barring some amazing rise on the part of Petro, which I don't think is likely, I think it's safe to say we're looking at a Fajardo matchup against the center-right coalition, which will be a likely presidential, vice presidential ticket of Marta Lucia Ramirez and Ivan Duque. This has been David Unsworth with the Pan Am Post English podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel.